We're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and pursue the truth with FBI whistleblowers and founding suspendables Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast on a Thursday, coming to you live on rumble.com/amradpod, as we always do, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, 10:30 Eastern time, guys. Thank you, as always, for joining us today. If you haven't already, make sure you give us a nice thumbs up. Follow the program. We're approaching 6,000 followers on Rumble, trying to crest over that and get to the next one as we continue to expand out. If you like to listen to us on the audio format of the podcast, you can do that. iTunes, Spotify, iHeart, available also on X, at X America News, at Real Steve Friend, at GOB Actual, and the YouTube is up there and running. So continuing to branch out, trying to reach and radicalize more Americans here on the AmRad Pod. It's still just Steve Friend, at Real Steve Friend, running solo here on the podcast because GOB Actual Garrett O'Boyle, my compadre, compatriot, cohort, co-host, still up in Alaska. Getting some cool pictures from him as he's going out and hiking and enjoying the 23 and a half hours of sunlight that they have going on there. It's pretty unique. I know he actually served up there when he was with the military, so it's probably nice for him to get to share that experience with his little girls so that they could see at one point where dad lived in the final frontier. And hopefully he'll be back with us soon. But today we don't need him because today at Real Steve Friend has plenty to discuss, and I'm really angry. Well, sort of, because today we're going to be talking and actually asking a question about who governs. I stumbled across this theory of governance. It's called the elite theory. It's something that's worth delving into. And the question is, who is really in charge of things? And we're going to contrast that with a more pluralistic theory. It sounds nerdy, but it's not. It's basic civics, and we'll explain it to you, and we can make a decision of, do we have one, do we have other, or do we have the worst combination, and that is taking the worst aspects of both and mix them into a nice witch's brew, which is probably the closest thing that we have today in the United States of America. And no better evidence of that as that there are some big name individuals being subpoenaed to come and testify in front of Congress about Epstein, the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. And we're going to bring in the Clintons and the Comeys and the Obamas of the world. And it'll be lots of sound and fury, signifying nothing, as the elites tend to do, and then they tend to enrich themselves. We'll get to that. The United States has way more debt than it's actually being reported, and that is, again, at the fault of the elites, not you, but we'll actually give you the numbers so you can know just how bad it actually is. Americans, justifiably so, are stressing out about the price of groceries. A couple of slimy politicians, one from each one of the parties, are engaging in some hoaxes or some violence or some scams all across the board. So we're going to get a discussion about one Corey Mills, Republican from Florida, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from New York. And then we'll talk about government censorship and potentially a push for the mark of the beast. So a lot to get to today. I'm excited to get to it all. And I want to kick it off with this very academic piece that I found as we're discussing and asking the question of who governs, who is actually in charge. And I found it over from SUNY, State University of New York. And it's an interesting piece. They do get very leftist, communist at some points, and I will exclude those because it's not really necessary for the topic we're going to be discussing today. Plus, it'll probably make you very angry, and I don't want that happening to you. I want you to start the day off great here on the AmRad Pod. So the piece is called Who Governs? Elitism, Pluralism, and Trade-Offs. Many Americans fear that a set of elite citizens is really in charge of government in the United States, and that others have no influence. This belief is called, and get this, it's called elite theory of government. Now, according to elite theory, the wealthy use their power to control the nation's economy in such a way that Those below them can advance economically. Their wealth allows the elite to secure for themselves important positions in politics. Then they use this power to make decisions and allocate resources in ways that benefit them. It's a very Aaron Burr perspective of government. Government exists to line my own pockets, to not just personally enrich myself, but advance myself in society, attain more power, attain the political outcomes that I want. It's not really in the interest of the people who have me here. Now, politicians, according to the elite theory, do the bidding of the wealthy instead of attending to the needs of the ordinary people. And order is maintained by force, as is most elements of government. After all, we do sort of give a government all the guns, particularly if you don't live in a great state like Florida. They do have the force of power, of force, the ability to take away your freedom, ability to make you do certain things, because at the end of every single law basically is the threat of death. I mean, ultimately it can get to that. And you can, quibble about, is it really that serious? But let's say you get a traffic ticket for walking outside of the crosswalk. It's a traffic law. Now, you could elect to not pay that, and there could be a fine accruing, but what happens if you refuse to pay the fine? What happens if you refuse to pay the interest or the additional penalties? They could garnish your wages, and things could escalate. You could be held into some sort of contempt of court. And let's say that you refuse to let the deputies bring you into custody, and now you're fighting the police in a deadly force situation, all from a crosswalk. That's sort of an argument to the extreme to make the point that at the end of every single law that the people who are in charge are trying to enforce is the threat of loss of freedom and potentially the loss of life. Now, to this elite theory, I think it's pretty self-evident that a lot of people have attained power and are doing so to personally enrich themselves. After all, that's why Josh Hawley and others are trying to push along this new bill that's going to stop stock trading, but there'll be some nice carve-outs in there, and there's going to always be workarounds that these people are aware of, because they can't let that gravy train stop running through. They have to personally enrich themselves. But to this piece, they give a couple of really good examples of the people who are in charge and how elite they really are, and it is pretty interesting. 1/3 of U.S. presidents have attended Ivy League schools. Only 42% of Americans actually have a college degree, so pretty wide disparity there. We've actually only had 47 different presidents. And if you see that Grover Cleveland and Donald Trump are repeats, there's only been 45 men. Now, more than half of the members of Congress are millionaires. Their median net worth is just over $1 million, and the majority of them send their kids to elite private schools. Now, the contrast here to the elite theory, according to this piece from State University of New York, it's not elite theory. The flip side of the coin is called pluralist theory. Now, in contrast, pluralist theory says that political power rests with competing interest groups who share influence in the government. And it's back to civics and how a bill becomes a bill, and we have co-equal branches of government, and as each endeavors to attain more power or assert its power over the others, they're going to check each other. And that's the competing theory of government, according to this piece. But what happens if we get the worst of both worlds? What happens if we have, yes, competing interests within the government, but they're all populated by the elites who all kind of know each other and get along, and then present for us nice theater of conflict that we really hate each other and we can't get along at all, and keep us distracted, entertained to some degree. I mean, how many people are sitting down every evening and watching the cable news lineup on their channel of choice, be it Fox News or CNN, MSNBC, Newsmax, whatever? They're being, they think, informed, educated perhaps, but really so much of it's entertainment and the professional wrestling aspect from Washington, D.C., as both parties seem to be going at it all the time, and they never seem to get what we want. Nobody ever really seems happy except them. Those are the people who are stuck in the gridlock, apparently, for all appearances. And yet they continue to enrich themselves. And you can't help but think that there are meetings going on behind closed doors where they're manipulating things as members of the elite, as millionaires who send their kids to elite academic institutions, whereas the rest of Americans are just kind of going about their day. You could pretty clearly see that they might view you a little bit different than they view their peer group, the other people who are wearing their congressional pins and attending the lobbyist parties. And it got me thinking, and it's not a movie reference, but it is a Hollywood reference. And this one's 35 years old. And this is probably the greatest example of elitism. Mr. Burns.
Proceed, Smithers.
Our first issue, sir, is our low productivity and record high worker accident rate.
Any suggestions?
A round of layoffs might wake up the
We
idiots.
could put caffeine in the water cooler.
Well, those are my ideas. You people don't think, you regurgitate. That's why I promoted someone who's in touch with the workers. You.
I think you mean him, sir.
You then. How would you improve the worker situation?
Well, sir, for one thing, we had a problem every Tuesday when the cafeteria would serve fish sticks.
Fish sticks? What in blazes are you talking about?
Well, sir, they cut the head off the fish and chop up the rest of the sticks and then put seasoned bread.
I know what fish sticks are. Get to the point.
Well, you only get this tiny little cup of tartar sauce to dip in them, and I always run out.
Will you stop wasting our time, Simpson?
Shut up, Smithers. Can't you see what he's saying? A happy worker is a busy worker. 3 cents worth of tartar sauce could save us thousands of man-hours in labor. I like the cut of your jib, Simpson. Let the fools have their tartar sauce.
Enjoy your tartar sauce, boys. Enjoy. Give me your plate. Don't crowd. Plenty for everybody.
Homer Simpson, the voice of the common man, but Mr. Burns, elitist. Give the fools their tartar sauce. Keep them distracted, right? With bread and circus, whatever we have to give them, as we're really in control here, and we're viewing them as the rubes who are going to give us thousands of man hours to achieve whatever we want. And we're here sitting in this nice conference room with mahogany lining on the walls and probably a table that's somewhere in the area of $70,000 is what Andy McCabe spent for the FBI conference room table. Mr. Burns probably dropped that amount of money there. All right, so that's the background for the conversation we're going to have today and the question about who governs. And let's get to some of the news stories we want to talk about today. First one comes from the BBC. And as long as we're on the subject of bread and circus, that's where I think this one's going. Headline: Clinton's subpoenaed to testify in congressional Epstein investigation. Republican James Comer, chairman of the House Oversight Committee, issued subpoenas to the Clintons and 8 other individuals. Now, the Oversight Committee is seeking information about Jeffrey Epstein's history after President Trump's administration's decided against releasing more federal files on the dead financier. Now, who is being subpoenaed? Former Attorney General Merrick Garland, former Attorney General Loretta Lynch, and Eric Holder, Barack Obama's wingman, and Alberto Gonzales, Attorney General under the Bush administration. They were summoned along with Jeff Sessions, Bill Barr, both Attorney Generals under Trump Part 1. And they both led the Justice Department during that time. And then also we have former FBI Director James Comey and Bob Mueller, who apparently is in some sort of elder care facility, so I don't think he's going to be able to answer that subpoena. Now, here are my thoughts, and then there's going to be lots of discussion about this, particularly on the cable news. I mean, this is very entertaining. We have pitted on one side James Comer, hero of the Republic, or of the Republican Party establishment in Washington, D.C., who's going to hold really heated hearings. He's going to gather all the facts, using your tax dollars, of course, to do that. And then once he's aggregated all that information, he'll hire somebody to ghostwrite a book, and then he'll go do a nice book tour, maybe a cable news tour, and advertise that book and say, you should buy this information that actually already belongs to you. And I'll explain to you how I wrote my strongly worded letter and all the progress we made. And really, what are the hearings going to amount to? It's just an opportunity for one side to get viral moments, and then the other side to counter and get their own viral moments. It's entertaining. You're going to have members of the Oversight Committee who are going to grill Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, and they're going to own them so hard. It'll probably lead to some nice fundraising and campaign advertisements. And perhaps they will be proposed to be elevated within the party next time, next go around. They'll chair some sort of subcommittee because they're a rising star within the party. And that goes for both Republicans and Democrats. They do it to each other. And then once the lights go off and they walk backstage, not into the office, backstage, there's high fives all around. I mean, after all, James Comer can probably asks one of his other Republicans or even Democrats to buy a couple thousand of those books with their campaign funds, and then he'll return in kind with his campaign funds, all completely legal per Matt Gaetz in the discussion I had with him more than 2 years ago. Nothing's going to amount to this. They're not measuring orange jumpsuits for James Comey. That'd be a pretty freakishly tall orange jumpsuit. Now that I think about it, the man is, after all, 6'8" and looks like a giant pulsing middle finger to whoever he's standing in a group with. Now, I don't think that we'll actually see a modicum of justice. We do, after all, have a two-tiered system of justice. It is interesting how this is all centering around the Jeffrey Epstein hoax, as President Trump originally tried to characterize it a couple of weeks ago. We're now, 32 days since the Department of Justice, over a holiday weekend, July 4th weekend, during massive deadly flooding in Texas, leaked to Axios, a left-wing source, that the Department of Justice had considered the client list aspects, and they're just not there, and they took quite a bit of heat. So what did they do? Well, first they had to immediately pivot. We, after all, have to keep the masses entertained, give the fools their tartar sauce. So we started to talk a lot about the Russiagate, the Russia collusion stuff. And that continues to be ongoing. And again, I don't think we're going to see a modicum of justice attached to that. But then we had to reintroduce the Epstein stuff because there were still people out there like myself, real Steve Friend, who continues to hammer home that, yeah, you might do X, but you didn't do the Epstein thing. So that's why we had the elite pedophile rapists going free. So now they've returned to it. You've got the Attorney General who's opening up a grand jury, and now we've got subpoenas going out, and we're going to be talking and grilling former attorneys general about Jeffrey Epstein. It's not about the client list. If we go back to this BBC article, they don't actually talk about a client list. In fact, they describe him as just a financier, not a convicted trafficker of children for sexual purposes. The subpoenas here are about the information on his history. No further information. So who were his friends? Where did he like to go to eat dinner over the weekend? I mean, nothing specific. And these people are all pretty much awful and deplorable. I don't have any love lost for Hillary Clinton or Eric Holder, after all, but they could have a perfectly reasonable explanation for having interacted, particularly with someone who was the Attorney General and in charge of the Justice Department. And this was under investigation. They might have information there, but this is all just fake and a show. It's supposed to put these people in the hot seat under the lights so that the masses can be entertained, and we can be distracted from the fact that the people who are in charge are going to be calling the shots pretty much suck at their jobs, which is what we need to get to next. We're going to have to nerd out a little bit, guys. This is not too nerdy when it comes to the money, but it is vitally important and it is eye-opening. So without further ado, this is a Substack. It's called Stark Realities. And the piece is called Think America Owes $37 Trillion? It's far worse than that. Now, it's written by Brian McClinchy, and he goes into the fact that we are on the hook for way more money than $37 trillion that you hear about in all the negotiations that go on with the budget and raising the debt ceiling. And again, sound and fury signifying nothing as they have these fake fights. And then at the end of it all, they just say, okay, we will acquiesce and give you everything that you want if you give us everything that we want. And then the American people get screwed. So here's the Substack. Many fiscally conscious Americans will tell you the national debt has reached $37 trillion. But according to a barely publicized report from the Department of the Treasury, the actual total of the United States obligations is more than $151 trillion. We're nearing in on 5x of what most people believe the actual amount is. Now, how is that possible? Well, they play some accounting games because they are elitists. They aren't dumb. They don't use the same accounting principles that you have to use when you file your taxes as a private business. They don't use this accrual accounting. They use cash accounting, and we don't have to go into the details there. This, after all, isn't an accounting level course in college, but just know that they're playing some tricks as it comes to recording their books. So as a result of these tricks, there are these things, this term, and it's called unfunded liability. And it basically means the government has promised to pay something in the future. We're on the hook for it. We made the promise. But since we haven't had to pay it yet, we don't owe it yet because that's the way we do accounting at a government level. Now, I know that doesn't make sense, but it does if you're an elitist who wants to keep the rubes distracted and eating their tartar sauce and their fish sticks at lunch, but not really paying attention to what you're doing and the problems you are creating and the solutions that are inevitable that you're going to have to seek out in order to keep the game going, to keep the house of cards standing up. So $151 trillion is actually somewhere close to what our obligations are. That includes $15 trillion for future payments to federal workers and veterans, the benefits that they're going to be owed after they finish their careers out. The biggest is going to be Social Security and Medicare, because that's required. That's not discretionary. That is set. The government and the legislature can argue all they want every time it comes to one giant omnibus package that Smithers, i.e. Mike Johnson, assured us we weren't going to get, but continuing resolution, omnibus bill, giant debt packages. They'll quibble and they'll go on TV and they'll speak at length about how we have to bring down discretionary spending. But it's actually not really that much in discretionary spending. Most of it is mandatory. That includes Social Security and Medicare, because that's over $100 trillion that we're already on the hook for. It's around $106 trillion. So the total amount, if you're being honest and you're following true accounting principles, is roughly $151 trillion. Now, again, let's do a little bit of math. 151 trillion that we owe. What do we have? I mean, if this was a personal finance situation, if you were in a lot of debt and you just had to try to pay it off and they were coming in and they were taking everything you owed, what do we have and what do we owe? We owe 151. If you add up everything that we have as a country now, it's just under $8 trillion in commercial assets, which leaves us $143 trillion in the hole. $143 trillion, according to this Substack. And again, let me throw this up there just so they get the credit that they deserve. It's called Think America Owes 37 trillion. It's far worse than that. Now, if you subtract out what we have from what we owe $143 trillion. That is 85% of all net wealth that Americans have earned since the country was founded. That amounts currently to over $1 million per household in America that you're on the hook for. Actually, it's your kids and grandkids. $1 million. Now, if you don't even count the unfunded liabilities, the things that we've promised to pay, but we didn't record them because we're the government, we can do whatever we want. Nobody, after all, is going to come to our house with a gun and arrest us, particularly if our last name is Clinton. Not even counting the unfunded liabilities that represent the biggest part of the problem, the national debt alone is increasing $156 million every hour. That is the 37 trillion total that you see. That is going up $156 million every hour. How many people in this audience right now listening to the sound of my voice? I mean, if we tally it up at the end, I mean, maybe we'll have a couple of thousand. If we add up all the money that we all make for the rest of our lives, does it equal $156 million? I mean, I hope it does, but let's be realistic. Probably not. And your government is spending that in less time than we have remaining for me to talk to you today on the American Radicals podcast. And they're the elites, right? They're super smart. They know what they're doing. The adults are always in charge. But what did they set us up for? Which is the next piece. And this comes from a friend of mine, Daniel Horowitz, over at The Blaze. And he is talking about housing and interest rates. And this is the fault of those elites, the elite theory, and how it's completely backfired. His piece is called The Rate Cliff is Real, and Washington Created It. Now, remember the late 1990s? Mortgage rates in the late 1990s, when I was in high school, they sat between 7 and 8%, which today, I mean, over a quarter century later, that sounds catastrophic. We have to get out of this. But that was pretty normal then. Mortgage rates sat between 7 and 8%. Nobody panicked or complained. People bought homes. Prices were pretty reasonable. Inflation was low. But then came the dot-com crash. Then we had to have the post 9/11 war on terror and the giant spending that George W. Bush started. And then the Bill Clinton era affordable housing scheme started to come due. So as a result, the elites, the people in government, particularly over at the Federal Reserve, came up with a brilliant idea that they were going to reduce interest rates. And when they reduced interest rates, they let the cash flow to people. And that, as a result, caused houses to go shooting up very quickly. And that set us up with a nice little bubble that all came collapsing down in 2008 with the financial collapse. Now, what did they do? I mean, did they learn their lesson? They say, like, reducing the interest rates was probably not the best thing. Probably mandating that banks give loans for homes to people who had no jobs, no income, and no assets. Ninja loans. Look it up. That's a real thing. That's probably a bad idea. Oh, and it's probably a worse idea for you to package the fact that they owe hundreds of thousands of dollars into some sort of investment scheme and let other people invest in the ninja loans ability to pay the loans that they're going to be unable to pay, because as a result, the entire economy will basically come crashing down. Did we learn a lesson for that? No. We got bailouts. Don't you remember? And we got trillions of dollars in more debt spending. And who remembers the number 787 billion? I do. I saw it and heard it for months. That was the Obama stimulus package for the shovel-ready jobs. They just weren't just so shovel-ready. This is when we started to take a giant lurch into the communism. So we didn't learn a lesson from that. We had bailouts, and they continued to keep interest rates very low because people can't afford to have an increased interest rate. Then they're not going to be able to buy a home. There's going to be too many homeless people. So you see how this cycle started, because as keeping interest rates low and spending a whole boatload of money created a lot of inflation, and it caused the housing prices to continue to go up and up and up. But I mean, that was 2008. I mean, it was so long ago. Where were you in 2020 when we had another crisis in the form of an unspecified virus from an unspecified location? And what was the solution to that? Oh, well, we had to keep the interest rates low, and we had to spend trillions of dollars again. So we've just compounded it through Democrat administrations, through Republican administrations, and it's continued to get worse and worse and worse. And back to this piece from Daniel Horowitz. So we printed $7 trillion during coronavirus, and we subsidized almost everything. We kept interest rates to basically zero, and now we've hit the wall. Because inflation is so bad, there is so much money that is circulating around the system that the Federal Reserve has had to increase the interest rates. And when they increase the interest rates, the hope is that some of the dollars will be reinvested or will be used to purchase bonds because they'll be more lucrative. And those dollars come out of circulation, they can be destroyed. it doesn't really work on a one-for-one basis, but that's the philosophy behind it. And again, I'm trying not to be too nerdy. But back to how it affects you, the rube who likes his tartar sauce with his fish sticks. People don't want to give up their 2% and their 3% mortgage rates. People are kind of stuck in their home, a home that's accrued enormously in value. I mean, let's say you bought a house for $200,000, $300,000 maybe a decade ago. It could be worth $600,000. Now, you haven't paid it off in that time, and you can't sell that house because it's too expensive for somebody to buy. You're asking for too much money, and the interest rates are so high, they're going to have a higher housing payment than you for that because it's basically a double the purchase price. Plus, their interest rates are massive. So, do you really have that wealth? If you're unable to liquidate it, now you're stuck in that house. So, basically, sellers want prices for houses that are more than the buyers can actually afford. And the actual number is a household needs around $125,000 in qualified income, basically the amount of money that you're making in any given year to afford a average home. But the average income is around 80,000. So most average people can't afford to buy a home. So the people who want to get out of the house and maybe enjoy the fact that that house seems to have accrued in value is worth more. They want to have extra spending money, maybe downsize. Maybe they're empty nesters and say, hey, look, we got this house. We bought low. We want to sell high and pocket some money and go enjoy our golden years. Now that the kids are out of the house, they're stuck. They can't get out. So are they going to reduce the prices? Are they going to forego loss of all of that accrued value? And on the outside, the person who needs to buy a house, the young family that's expanding and having some more kids, the 2-bedroom apartment's just not going to cut it anymore. Houses are too expensive. They can't buy the house. In fact, they're stuck in the apartment and the apartment rates are going up. The rents are going up because there's just not enough apartments. Everybody seems to be kind of stuck in a stasis because of the inflation, because of the interest rates that your elite government caused. Now, it's a little bit nerdy, but let's make it more granular. Let's get out of the housing things and what you're feeling, the anxiety that I feel every time that I go do our shopping, which I do once a week in the friend household and go and look for that yellow tag beef. Well, that anxiety, that's pretty much universal from Headline USA. The vast majority of U.S. adults are stressed about grocery costs. This comes from an Associated Press poll. About half of all Americans say that the cost of groceries is a major source of stress in their life right now, while 33% say it's a minor source. So I can do simple math. 50 plus 33 means 83%. More than 4 in 5 Americans are in some way, shape, or form stressed out when they have to go buy food, which is kind of important. 4 out of 10 Americans under the age of 45, so family age, young family age, say that they've used what are known as buy now, pay later services. And what are they using it for? I mean, are they using it to buy a house or a car? No, they're spending it on entertainment and restaurant meals. They are putting their Grubhub on payments because otherwise they can't afford those small luxuries in life. And look, if you're in some sort of financial distress, you probably shouldn't be focusing in on your entertainment or going out to eat. That seems like a pretty bad financial decision. But how desperate are you to say, look, I want to get those chicken McNuggets. I got to get it delivered to my house, but I can't afford the McNuggets. So maybe I can make 4 easy payments of the $3.99. Whoever has to make that decision to eat now and pay later, that's a struggle because there's too much money in the system and people aren't bringing in enough income for themselves to be able to afford the essentials like food, housing, energy, and fuel. And that is at the feet of the elites who have been in charge, the adults who have sat around that conference room table and made these decisions for so many years. And they don't know their ass from a hole in the wall. Or do they? Are they doing it on purpose? Because they all seem to be doing really well. They know all the games to play. I mean, if they're not doing insider trading, Well, then they're declaring their boyfriends their husbands, sometimes to get really cool tickets and travel, and other times so that they don't have to report how much money they have to the American people. They say, oh no, I'm not married to my boyfriend. What the heck am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about, of course, one Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. Alexandria occasionally using her prefrontal cortex. No, that's a dig. She's actually rather intelligent at what she's doing, and that's being an actress, paid performer, and a juggernaut when it comes to fundraising. I believe she's the number one fundraiser for the Democrats at this point. She'll be the Speaker of the House one day if she doesn't seek higher office than that. Mark the tape. Here we are, and it is August 7th, 2025 at Real Steve Friend, coming up on 35 minutes into the show. AOC, Speaker of the House in the next decade. Now, this piece comes from the Washington Examiner. It would help actually if I shared the right one. Here we go. House Ethics Committee slams AOC's manipulation of rules to shield, quote, spouses' financial fears from the public. Here's what she did. There's a House Ethics Committee. It rebuked AOC. I mean, very hard hitting. If you did this, you probably wind up going to prison for some sort of tax evasion, but she's a member of the elite. So she gets a little scolding, maybe a letter in her file. But if she behaves in 30 days, they'll pull that letter right out and say she's in good standing. So she got rebuked for simultaneously claiming that her longtime partner, whose name is Riley Roberts, is and isn't her spouse. This is what AOC did. She took a free ticket that was worth $35,000 for her boyfriend to attend the 2021 Met Gala with her. At the time, that was a gift that AOC could only accept for her legally married spouse. But AOC has never actually been legally married to Mr. Roberts. Roberts is only considered a spouse in the context of federal campaign finance law. That's what her lawyer argued. Now, in addition to attending the Met Gala for $35,000, her boyfriend also got to travel free to Japan and South Korea, and he has a spouse pin that he can put on his lapel and walk around the people's house and go see special access stuff that is only afforded to people who are married to representatives, elected representatives of Congress. He's had that since she's been in office in 2019. Now, there are being drawbacks. If they were in effect married, and they're not, there are drawbacks to being married to a member of Congress because you have to disclose your finances as well if you're married to one, because they don't want people sheltering their assets and hiding it and saying, well, no, that's not my money. That's my wife's money. That's what John Kerry did, right? You know, he doesn't fly private. That's his wife's private jet. Definitely not his. He's married to Teresa Heinz, the heiress to the Heinz ketchup fortune. And that's why he goes sailing out on the sea all the time in his private yacht. Look, these people are supposed to report this information to you because they're supposed to be accountable to you. But they know the rules. They're elite. They can evade that. That sounds like an evasion, seems like the appropriate term for what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is doing. So when it comes to getting free goodies and stuff, yeah, he's my husband. He gets that for free. But when it comes to telling you what he got, no. It's completely unwed. We're just figuring out where we stand in things. I mean, we've only been dating for like over half a decade. It's a platonic relationship. Now, she's hardly the only one who's a creep when it comes to her love life. Let's go to the real creep. And this is a story over from The Blaze. A friend of mine, Jill Savage, and Courtney Whale. And this involves one, Corey Mills, my congressional representative here in Congressional District 7 in the great state of Florida. And we've talked about Corey Mills a few times with the stolen valor stuff and with the fact that he might be some sort of secret Muslim. Well, now he's doing sextortion and could potentially be accepting bribes. Here's the piece. Miss United States accuses Corey Mills of sextortion and accepting money bags. Yes, in fact, Miss United States, like a beauty pageant, an actual beauty pageant star is now involved in this guy's world. This is madness. So to the piece. They both wanted to keep their relationship a secret when they began dating shortly after meeting in November 2021. And Miss United States, her name is Lindsay Langston. She is a young 20-something. She's actually getting involved in some Republican politics down here in Florida. And she was doing her pageant work at the time. Now, Corey Mills was then still almost a year away from winning his congressional race, his first one. So he was not elected to Congress at that time. And he was also in the middle of a divorce, which I believe he's still going through, which would mean this divorce has been going on for nigh on 4 years. So within a year or so, he began expressing interest in starting a family with Miss United States. But Langston was interested in continuing the relationship. She didn't want to move in with him until Corey Mills was officially divorced. And he told her that they were. She said that they were just waiting on a stamp and the divorce would be finalized. Everything was settled. So they moved into a beach house together here, actually like joggable distance from me in New Smyrna, Florida. I'm kind of going to give Jill Savage a hard time. I could have done follow-up interviews with Miss United States if she needed. So Corey Mills was under obligation at the time to pay $12,000 a month for their beach house and rent, plus $21,000 a month for his DC penthouse, which he's now in arrears on. I don't believe he's made payments in several months. So this dude was on the hook for 33 grand a month. Tell me that these people aren't the most elite amongst us. Quote, there were lots of times he had somebody meet him at the house to bring him cash, said Langston. People would come with money bags and he would get cash. After more than 3 tumultuous years together, they finally broke up earlier this year in February. And the reason they broke up was because Corey Mills had a domestic violence incident happen in Washington, D.C. with his new girlfriend who he's living with at the penthouse, that apparently Miss United States was unaware that he had this side piece. Now, Langston moved out of the beach house after that incident, and she thought everything was over. But then she started to get some weird text messages from Congressman Corey Mills, and she showed them. She actually brought receipts. These are not just wild allegations that she's making against an elected member. That would probably go pretty poorly for her, especially because it seems like Corey Mills might have a relationship with the FBI because he or somebody within his sphere mobilized an FBI agent from the FBI Orlando resident agency. I believe her name was Shady, to go and try to go after my friend Jill Savage, try to recruit a source to inform on her, a member of the journalist community. Now, here are some of the quotes that Corey Mills threw out. Well, text messages who he sent to Miss United States because he was uber mad that she left him because he was still technically married to another woman and dating another one in Washington, D.C., and tuning her up to the point where police were summoned. Quote, you want to date or be with someone else? Be my guest. But they need to know well in advance that if we cross paths, I don't care this week, this month, or this decade. They better damn well know it's coming every time. Well, after all, he is, I don't know, was he like MARSOC plus Navy SEAL plus PJ, Force Recon Sniper, according to him, right? So he's a real badass. Stolen Valor, anybody? Another quote. May want to tell every guy you date that if we run into each other at any point, strap up, cowboy. Dude, this dude is a tool. That's not even a good one. Then he also apparently had, and this is sensitive, he had some pictures and videos of Miss United States in a state of undress. And he threatened to send them out to her any new romantic interests. So this is ongoing. This is going to be investigated. I believe she's represented already by an attorney, Anthony Sabatini, who ran against Corey Mills originally in the original primary race in 2022. So an epic comeback for Mr. Sabatini here to now represent this young lady. And if there was some sort of criminal malfeasance involved or like a threat or coercion, Corey Mills might be looking at some sort of criminal charges. But these are the elites, right? These are the people who are in charge. These are those who govern us. AOC, Corey Mills, formerly. We had the Clintons and the Comeys, all of them, making the great and best decisions for us all. All right. Now, we did have the recent victory, I guess, the rescissions where we're not going to fund PBS and NPR anymore. But I do want to get to one aspect of it to show just how the elitists behave themselves. Again, sitting in the conference room, having the conversations about how they can get those workers to just grind out more hours and then take a giant chunk for themselves and line their own pockets. This one comes from the Federalist's conversation about the chief executive officer at the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. That's the organization that basically doled out money to PBS and NPR. The CEO salary at this now defunded Corporation for Public Broadcasting could fund a radio station for years. Just a good government servant, after all. So the most recent information that they were able to get, financial information, comes from 2022. The CEO, her name is Patricia Harrison, her salary for running the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is hitting you and me up and complaining about the fact that they can't get our sweet, sweet tax dollars anymore. And if you are one of the few people, the few dozen who buzz watch the PBS, and you're being constantly bombarded with requests for you to donate to them so they can send you a tote bag, I guess, of appreciation, her salary was $524,000. Now, that same year, Corporation for Public Broadcasting spent over $19 million in salaries, and 14 employees that year were earning over $250,000. 5 employees were paid over $470,000 to run this organization, which funded NPR and PBS, which can't stand on their own 2 feet. They're essentially like the WNBA, completely subsidized. Without our sweet, sweet tax dollars, they're going defunct. Now, they had a recent meeting. This is where the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, their board members got together to whine and cry about the fact that they're not getting their $1 billion this year so they can pay themselves $500,000 as they continue to just dole out money to people to run these radio stations that nobody listens to and these television networks that nobody cares about, and push out information about, I don't know, transgender little people living in the Aleutian Islands, or let's turn Big Bird gay. There's no interest or market for that. You're completely subsidized for it. So they get this meeting with the mucky muck sitting around the conference room table, I'm sure, and they tried to play on the sympathy card. So during the meeting, they spent 30 minutes talking about how important it is for this NPR radio to be available. And they decided to use a radio station in Alaska, Sand Point, Alaska, to talk about how, without it, if there was an emergency weather situation, now that it's gone, people will die. Well, that's not true, because people get alerts on their phones and there's other ways to actually get that information out there. So they're just not being honest about it. But as long as we're going to talk about that particular radio station, it was radio station KSDP in Sand Point, Alaska. And again, this piece comes from the Federalist. In 2022, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting gave that radio station $211,000. The radio station's total revenue was $265,000. Now, the portion that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting gave them could have been paid by the CEO's salary for 2 years. They could have basically just zeroed out her salary and given that money to this radio station that was so important it was going to save lives. But really, it's more important for Patricia Harrison to get her $500,000. I wonder how, and this is what they break it down, the folks at this radio station might be angry to learn that their annual budget for the compensation packages for all employees combined that year, all employees combined at this little radio station in Alaska, was $140,000. This woman, who was the CEO of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, earned over $500,000. Her bonus was $144,000. Her actual bonus was more than all salaries combined at this vital, crucial radio station that is out there saving lives. They're elitists. They hate you. They think they should lord and lady over you. They have no connection to anything, any semblance of reality, and they're unashamed of it. They think that the systems that exist are for them to personally enrich themselves and put themselves in positions of power and prominence to dictate how to run your life because you're just a rube. You're somebody who likes to eat fish sticks, not duck à l'orange like them. Or what's the side for duck à l'orange? Well, it's clearly have to be arugula, Barack Obama's favorite vegetable. Look that up. He actually said it. And as we're talking about duck à l'orange, what are you going to have to eat? What are you going to be required to eat when you're not trying to buy the yellow tag beef, which will probably go up 3, 4, 5x in price because of the inflation rates that the elitists caused? But don't worry. Don't worry. Other elitists have figured out what to do, including Jeff Bezos, the man who tried to take away Amy Nelson and Carl Nelson's entire family fortune over at Amazon. He's branching out and he's diversifying his portfolio. So, Mr. Bezos, he went to the FDA. It's not enough for him to completely co-opt the Department of Justice. Now he's reached out to the FDA, which approved Jeff Bezos's lab-grown fake fish for the United States food supply. And they did it without any safety data. Isn't this wonderful? Only the best people work in public service. Only the best people in government who have your best interest in mind. They want to protect you against fraud and force if they work for the Department of Justice. If they work for the FDA, they don't want you to get sick. They want you to live a long and healthy life, which is why you should totally eat fake fish that they didn't test for anything. This comes from Slay in a move that has raised serious concerns, you think, about the future of food safety. The United States Food and Drug Administration has approved lab-grown salmon for human consumption. The fake fish product is produced by Jeff Bezos's ag tech startup company, which is called Wild Type. What's even more alarming is that this approval was based solely on this company, Wild Type's own internal safety claims. The FDA just said, we'll take your word for it. It's probably good. Now, Wild Type is backed by heavyweights like Amazon founder Jeff Bezos and Cargill, which is big ag. Oh, and Leonardo DiCaprio. So we've got elitists in government, elitists in business, elitists in agriculture, and members of Hollywood telling you what you should eat. It's gross. I actually got 3 final pieces from one particular website called Reclaim the Net. And I do want to go into them because it'll give us a nice, broad, global view, and then we'll bring it closer to home because on the American Radicals podcast, we care about America. But first, let's branch out. Let's expand our horizons, look overseas, across the pond to Europe where they're fancy and they spell reporter with 2 P's and an EUR. And it's about the European Union. The European Union is reviving a plan to ban private messages. They are wrestling with a controversial plan that would turn private messaging services into a surveillance tool. Now, for over 3 years, the EU has had talks stalling out over whether or not cell providers should be forced to scan every single user's messages for possible illegal material and forward anything suspicious to law enforcement. So we're going to partner cell phone companies with law enforcement and deputize them to do surveillance of the people handling those devices. The European Commission is still pushing for a universal scanning requirement. But, that's over there. They don't even have a Bill of Rights. They don't have a First Amendment. They don't have a Fourth Amendment. We're safe here. So just take a deep breath because we're probably going to be good, right? Right? Well, there's what's going on in Europe. Well, what about the rest of the earth? Well, another elitist, Sam Altman, who's the OpenAI chief executive officer, he's pitching an eyeball scanning identification system. Now, this one is the mark of the beast. No other explanation for it. Now, Sam Altman was shut down by private regulators because they were skeptical that his iris scanning ID scheme and was not something that the American people would want, and it is not in our DNA. It's not in our system of governance, and it's really creepy. But he's not going to give up, and we'll get to why in a second. Because after all, we set up systems, the elites do, They set up systems that and then invoke problems which they themselves can solve and personally enrich themselves. There's no better example than what Sam Altman is doing right here. So he's actually turning to the financial sector to pitch this iris scanning technology, which is called World ID. He says that the authentication systems we have already are ineffective. Artificial intelligence has defeated most of the ways that people authenticate. All these take a selfie and wave and do your voice, any sort of recognition. Artificial intelligence can effectively overcome that. So now access to your bank records could go to anybody who has artificial intelligence that would replicate your voice or your movement. So you're not safe. We have to do something better. Now, Sam Altman's proposed remedy, of course, is World ID. He's already pot committed at this point because they've created the technology and it was rejected. So he has to find another place to use it. Otherwise, all that billions of dollars in time and capital and resources is going to be for naught. So does he just turn around and say, look, I had a vision of being a petty tyrant, and that was bad on me. I'm just going to have to take this one as a stupid tax? Of course not. He's an elitist. So he's going to, if he can't walk in the door, he'll bust down the window. If he can't get in the window, he'll jump over the wall, like Nancy Pelosi, where she was talking about Obamacare. Now, his remedy is World ID, global digital identity system that uses iris scans. The vision fits squarely with Silicon Valley's familiar playbook, where they invent disruptive technologies, then they normalize it, and then offer their own product as the only safeguard. Sam Altman's argument boils down to a stark proposition. Artificial intelligence has overwhelmed the traditional verification tools, and he is nothing if not a giant proponent of artificial intelligence. But now the AI has caused the problems. Thankfully, he's invented the solution, and only a biometric identification system that scans your eyeballs and then takes that information and puts it into banks around the world who are totally 100% not going to collude with government, which will have your biometric data to be able to spy on you. That's the only solution. And when he gets his solution through, he'll reap the financial rewards. So he creates the problem and then has the solution. It's almost like the way that people promote within government, right? We've talked about it before. If you want to be a manager in an organization, say like my ex-girlfriend at the FBI, you don't do a job really well. That doesn't brief well. You don't say, look, I take care of my people. I let them do their jobs. I delegate authority. And then I just kind of trust in the people who have the knowledge and training, experience, and have been vetted as people of fidelity, bravery, and integrity to do the job of protecting the American people against fraud and force. That's a good way to never get promoted. No, what you do instead is you look around and you say, I have to invent a solution. And then I'll do that solution. And then you study more and you say, what problem can I apply it to so that I can develop a PowerPoint presentation, brief it up the chain of command, and then start to implement it, but then promote before it actually gets off the ground. So when it inevitably catastrophically fails, the blame isn't on me. It was on the people who implemented it after I'd already left. After all, I am an elitist who doesn't eat tartar sauce with my fish sticks. Ergo, it's on them, not me. I should probably be promoted 2 or 3 more times. Now, this build up for the last piece that I have, and again, comes from Reclaim the Net, talked about Europe and the globe. Let's bring it back closer to home, where we do have a First Amendment and we do have a Fourth Amendment. You should be able to think and say and believe what you want as long as it doesn't actually threaten anyone. And you should be secure in your personal effects and your papers against government surveillance. And yet, this Hollywood-backed bill would give government power to block websites. It's called the Block Bad Electronic Art and Recording Distributors Act. It's better known as Block Beard. Oh, they're so clever, those elitists, at coming up with acronyms. And it was introduced, it's bipartisan. Tom Tillis, soon to be leaving the Senate from North Carolina. Chris Coons, Marsha Blackburn, and Adam Schiff. Oh, what a witch's brew of awful representatives. Now, under the proposal, copyright owners could go to the federal court and have a website labeled a foreign digital piracy site. If successful, court could then order the United States service provider to block access to that website. So basically, the overriding concern as it's being advertised is that someone takes your intellectual property and they have a pirated version of your movie and they're streaming it on their website. So you can go to the federal government, the federal court, and say, block that website. Well, I mean, it's your intellectual property, but is no one seeing the cautionary tale? Is nobody seeing that this might be a precedent? Well, at Reclaim the Net, they actually do. So back to the piece. If courts can order an internet service provider to make a site disappear from view, that same logic could eventually apply to other types of content deemed problematic, not just pirated movies, but it could be things like you could be articulating how critical race theory is a problem in schools. If that might make you an anti-government extremist, we should probably take down your website. And because the bill has no public transparency requirements, the public could be kept entirely in the dark. They won't know what websites are blocked, or why they're blocked, or how long they're blocked. It's like these meetings are going on in a mahogany-lined office on a $70,000 conference room table as they're deciding on the fate of the rest of the world, the fools who eat their tartar sauce. Nothing has changed since 1990, when The Simpsons did such a good job of presenting Mr. Burns as one of those elites. These are the people who govern us. It's not just within our systems of the three branches. It's within the tech sphere. It's within entertainment. It's within banking. It's within our financial sector, housing, all of it. And they all view themselves as lords and ladies who should be American royalty because they know what is best. You don't. You're just a rube. And they've been able to successfully install themselves into positions where they're able to personally enrich themselves, reward their friends, hide it, of course. I mean, he's not my husband today. He is tomorrow, and then he's back to not being my husband again. Tune up their girlfriend, or if the other girlfriend finds out about that, threaten to destroy her and send out pornographic material and not hesitate for a second to send that message out there as an elected member of Congress who should be very fearful that there will be extra levels of scrutiny. No, they're elite. They're above reproach. They're above any sort of suspicion. They're above any sort of accountability, which is why Bill and Hillary Clinton, when they get called in by James Comer for their grilling, they'll all have a nice laugh backstage after it's all over. All right, I want to leave you, though, on a good note, a couple of good notes. Let's go to today's biblical worldview, as I'm filling it again for the great one at GOB Actual. And I'm going to go to Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 11. The Lord detests dishonest scales, but accurate weights find favor with him. When pride comes, then comes disgrace. But with humility comes wisdom. The integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity. Wealth is worthless in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death. The righteousness of the blameless makes their paths straight, but the wicked are brought down by their own wickedness. I think the people who govern us are firmly on the other side of the coin from what we should all aspire to, and that is to be righteous, to have humility, to seek wisdom, to be honest, to do the right thing at the right time in the right way for the right reasons, as we always endeavor to do here on the American Radicals podcast. That's the way of the Suspendables. And let's take it to a palate cleanse. And it's just kind of off the board. I know we've had a kind of a heavy discussion today, but I did see this one, and it does make fun of people who engage in white people sports because we're just not that athletic. So today's palate cleanse, completely out of left field, but it made me laugh nonetheless.
Very white people activity, very. Have y'all noticed how white folks are just making up new activities ever since black people kind of took over the good sports? There's not a lot of black guys playing spike ball, whatever that is. It's a change, man. Take the game of basketball, for example. The game of basketball was invented in the late 1800s by an old white guy, where at its origins, you granny shotted into a peach basket. And now you have 7-foot black men windmill dunking from the free throw line. It's like, yeah, let's just throw a beanbag in a hole in a piece of wood. Let's just...
He's not wrong, guys. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed that today as much as I did. Appreciate it, as always, for being with us. If you haven't already, give us a nice follow and a thumbs up here on Rumble. And tell a friend or 17,000 about the program. We're trying to expand here, as always, guys. We'll be back with you on Saturday, 10:30 Eastern Time here, rumble.com/amradpod. And until then, have a great day.
You've been listening to the voice of the Suspendables on the American Radicals podcast. Follow us on rumble.com/amradpod.